So hello guys. So today we got a special guest here.
Hello, YouTube.
We got my brother Charles. So obviously he's very much goated on YouTube with 11,000 subscribers or something channel. So obviously he's a big whale in comparison to me. But obviously he hasn't been active on YouTube for a while because of other commitments, work, and new members to the family and stuff. So. But he is very active on Instagram. So if you go and check out his Instagram account, Not Quite Jazz, and you comment 21 on any of his posts, then he will send you a free outside concept package, which kind of combines the concepts of the likes of Alan Holdsworth, George Garzone, Brian Baker. Obviously, he's very inspired by those guys, so he's kind of put together his own concept that helps you generate all these sounds. So, it's all totally free. So please check him out over there. Shoot him a follow. This little influencer's going crazy over there.
I look forward to seeing you.
Yeah, definitely check him out. But today, obviously it's usually my own little plug session, this channel, but we've got my bro on today, so we'll give him a little bit of love. So today we were going to do a top 10 of the greatest guitar players ever. And the other day, Larry Tamini, on the Jazz Guitar Facebook pages, he wrote a question and he wrote, what is the difference between a good guitarist and a great guitarist? So I thought it would be important to kind of distinguish this before we get started. So what do you think, bro? What do you think?
Good guitarist and a great guitarist.
Yeah, how would you distinguish that?
The very first person who comes to mind for me on this one, weirdly, is 𝐤𝐬𝐬. And the thing that has always amazed me about 𝐤𝐬𝐬, and I still love 𝐤𝐬𝐬 to this day, although I must admit I don't tend to listen to 𝐤𝐬𝐬 much anymore, is 𝐤𝐬𝐬 sounded like 𝐤𝐬𝐬 when he was, I think there's some clips of him when he was like 16 or 17, and he already sounded like 𝐤𝐬𝐬. He had his thing, that really defined language that 𝐤𝐬𝐬 uses. It was already formed at that early stage. There's been other great players who play in that neoclassical style post 𝐤𝐬𝐬, and they're fantastic, but it doesn't quite land the way it does with 𝐤𝐬𝐬 because it was authentic to him. So that was the very first thought that crossed my mind of that, is it's being authentic to yourself, I suppose, and committing to your own language, regardless of whether whether there's a commercial appeal. Obviously there was for 𝐤𝐬𝐬, but regardless of that, I think that's often a really overlooked thing. What do you reckon?
Well, I think that's obviously that's an important factor in it. Obviously, I put Charles on the spot here. I had to get stuck into the comment section with Larry Tamini, as you know what I'm like. So I have given this some thought before, and the conclusion I reached was, if I were to ask you who are the greatest composers, then everyone would say Bach, Mozart, and Beethoven, wouldn't they?
Yeah, well, they're the three big dogs, aren't they?
Exactly, they are the greats. Obviously, there are others who join that category, say like the likes of Tchaikovsky, Handel, and I think it's widely understood that these guys are the great composers. So for me, what is not subjective is the influence that these people have on the music that follows them.
Yeah, they're definitely in. They inspire they change the game, don't they? They change the game.
Exactly. And obviously everyone on the Facebook chat was, writing, oh, it's all down to their phrasing. It's all down to their jazz vocabulary and all this kind of stuff. But I think the only thing that isn't subjective is the impact they have on the wider musical landscape. So that is the way that I've come up with this list. And obviously it's just a bit of fun, and all these guys could warrant being number one.
Or they're the 10 most impactful, you would say?
Well, I would say the 10 greatest.
Yeah.
The 10 greatest, and I'll be honest, I have got a slight bias towards jazz and fusion on this list,
Of course.
obviously. But that's only right. So anyway, so getting stuck into the list, we've got number 10, And we're going in hot with Charlie Christian. I mean, how could you not include Charlie Christian on this list? The father of the electric guitar, many would say. Obviously, there were other guys at the time that were doing a similar thing, but, you know, ever since he strapped that pup or that pickup on that acoustic guitar, the landscape of guitar has been changed ever since. Obviously, he's a beautiful player. He could have been higher on this list. The reason I didn't put him higher is because obviously he died in his mid-20s.
As young as that, was he?
Yeah, he was in his 20s. So there are very few recordings. Obviously, he was around the same time as Parker, and they were, you know, they both influenced one another a lot. And I think he played with Benny Goodman, big band, that clarinet player.
Yeah.
Is it Benny Goodman?
Yeah.
So, I mean, such a mountain of a figure in the jazz community. Beautiful lines, like his ability to outline that altered chord was just. It's some really interesting vocabulary with Charlie Christian.
So do you think the technological innovation was relevant there with you mentioned the pickup? Do you think he would have had the same impact with or without that technology?
I mean, it's hard to say, isn't it? I think these things go hand in hand,
Of course, yeah.
don't they? I really.
And it probably influenced the way he played or the way he chose to play, because as we know, if you pick up an acoustic guitar versus an electric guitar, it does make you play slightly differently, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, 100%. Obviously, it was the very fact that he put the pickup on his acoustic guitar that turned the guitar into a lead instrument in the band context, because they could play over the drums. Whereas obviously,
Tenor saxes.
yeah, whereas obviously Django did that beforehand, but that was in a different context, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was a more acoustic context. So, yeah, so no, that was a huge factor, the technological developments, but it always is in music. As we'll see later on this list, because I've got some controversial picks maybe to some on this list. Not quite as controversial as my 𝐤𝐞𝐬𝐬 video, but along those lines.
We'll not dig that one back up. I think as well, there's probably most students nowadays, I would include myself in this, are probably relatively ignorant, if they're honest, of the impact. As a historical figure, Charlie Christian's well known, but maybe actually knowing his music. But we all know it through, as you said before, the impact that has had on the game. And we've all heard it secondhand through the great players that came after him. So even if you don't think you're familiar with his stuff, you will have heard it through great players that came after him.
Exactly.
Who are probably also on this list, I should guess.
Of course, yeah. So we're gonna put Charlie Christian at number 10. Because he's a proper OG in the jazz world, isn't he?
Oh God, yeah.
But anyway, so that brings us on to number 9. Oh, by the way, one of my students, Cal, is playing something at the Savoy, surfing at the swinging at the Savoy, or something.
No, it's not swinging at the Savoy. It's oh God,
something at the Savoy. Anyway, I can't remember the title. And anyway, Charlie Christian's got an amazing solo on that. So if you're watching, Cal, check that out. But anyway, so next we've got Jim Hall. Jim Hall coming in hot at number 9.
Yeah. Big Jim.
Yeah, I mean, what a master. So it took both me and my brother Charles a while to be able to appreciate Jim Hall and the kind of school that the players that followed his school. Players like
Peter Bernstein's the first one that comes to mind for me.
Wonderful. Yeah, I mean, he's a wonderful example. But guys like Bill Frisell too.
Metheny.
Yeah, Pat Metheny. However, we always appreciated Pat Metheny.
Yes.
And obviously got even more modern guys like Ben Monder and stuff. So it took us a while to be able to appreciate the impact Jim had. But he's just an undeniable master. It was never about the chops with Jim. he managed to get by without the chops, you know, playing ridiculous speeds, like the rhythm changes at ridiculous speeds with guys like Sonny Rollins. And Jim Hall would kind of structure his solos in a way that worked through the changes, always being truly intentional with what he played. And yeah, the way he would structure his solos between single note lines and then these comping ideas, it just made such a impact on the wider guitar scene.
And there was a real sensitivity to his playing as well, a real soft touch. In he do a lot of like dyadic stuff, where he's just playing in thirds or sixths, and he'd do them with a real, I don't know, just class. That's the word that comes to mind for Jim Hall, isn't it? Just class. But yeah, what a player. And again, if you don't think you know Jim Hall, you've heard his influence through those players that we've mentioned. Peter Bernstein, for me, is the main conduit of the Jim Hall thing. And I could always benefit from checking out more Jim Hall myself, definitely.
I agree with Peter Bernstein, though. I mean, it's that school, isn't it? Like, again, Peter Bernstein isn't known for his chops, but he doesn't need them because of his... No, he doesn't need them because he's just such a master at weaving melodies through the lines and you know, filling out the sound like a piano. So yeah, at number 9, we're going to go with Jim Hall. So here's a controversial one. At number 8, obviously, if this was a less jazz-focused list, then he would be maybe higher. At number 8, I'm going for Jimi Hendrix.
Right.
I'm going for Jimi Hendrix. And that is because I believe Jimi Hendrix had a huge impact in the jazz scene.
Specifically in the world of jazz.
Yeah, and the fusion scene too.
Right, go on, you're going to have to elaborate on that for me.
Well, I mean, he was going to do an album with Miles before he died. If you listen to stuff like... It's the only time you'll hear me swear on this channel, guys, but Bitches Brew.
Right.
If you listen to Bitches Brew,
yeah,
then I mean, I think the influences...
That's psychedelic influence, isn't it? That psychedelic language.
Yeah. So there's a huge influence. And if you listen to John McLaughlin, John McLaughlin very much wanted to bring that raw Jimi Hendrix energy into his early stuff with Mahavishnu.
Yeah.
I just think his impact on the whole guitar scene is undeniable. Even if you listen to his language, like in, you know, that famous track Machine Gun, it's very much getting into modal improvisation. Jimi Hendrix is the only... Someone will mention someone else in the comments, so don't quote me on this, but he's one of the only guitar players in rock who truly improvises like a jazz musician.
In terms of playing over changes and things like Little Wing and things like that, do you mean?
It's not so... I'm not talking... He does play over changes like that, but I'm talking more about the freedom of his improvisation. It captures that original blues spirit which evolved into jazz. Whereas if you listen to guitar players that came after, like the likes of Jimmy Page, or the solos start coming pre-composed. Whereas Jimi Hendrix is in the moment.
Yeah, flowing.
He's flowing in exactly the same way as a jazz musician. And that got lost in rock, especially in the modern metal stuff. I mean, you may as well play a Mozart trumpet concerto.
In terms of the preparation of the solos, you mean?
Exactly. They just play the same stuff every night, over and over again. Whereas Jimi Hendrix wasn't like that. He was a true jazz musician.
Yeah, the thing that, again, I have to hold my hand up to say I'm relatively ignorant of Hendrix's music. We used to... What was that transcription book we had? I don't remember, but when we were younger, we got really heavily into a transcription book. It had like crosstown traffic and all that sort of stuff in it.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
So I did go through that phase But the very first thing that comes to mind with Jimmy for me is development, like sticking on it could just be a lick, but a little melodic motif and weaving it through his solos, kind of the way that Coltrane did it, where he would stay on an idea for longer than you might want to yourself. You'd think, oh, I've done that one, I've got to move on now. But he would stick with an idea. Tim Miller does this great as well, is getting every single kind of squeezing every single drop out of your ideas. If it's good enough to play once, it's good enough to play 100 times.
100%. I mean, they're all along the Watchtower solo.
Exactly.
It's a great example of that. But so we've got a lot of guys to get through on this list. So we could talk about Jimi Hendrix for hours. I know, yeah, he was never, you were never taken by Hendrix as much as me, were you, bro?
But I was always impressed by the players that came after. I was quite easily impressed by flash and production as well. Whereas these are the sort of guys who, when I go back to, funnily enough, I was watching some Hendrix a couple of weeks ago, and you just go back to this stuff, and it's just like your jaw drops, especially in the historical context, where you think like this is getting on for 60, 70 years ago, and he's doing things which still by today's standards would be modern.
It's raw, isn't it? It's raw. Anyway,
tone as well. Oh, let's not start on the impact Hendrix's pedal board has had on guitar players, otherwise we'll be here all day.
Well, exactly. I mean, it's just monumental, isn't it? It's unquestionable, undeniable. So he's got a place on the list. So if it was a rock list, obviously he would be number 2. But obviously, no, there's only one guy that could hit the number 1 spot always for me. Anyway, so I think we're at number 6. So, but I'm not very good at counting. So
we're on 7.
Are we on 7? So Joe Pass. I'm putting at number 7.
Yeah.
So obviously he's higher up than the likes of Jim Hall, just because of his wider impact in the guitar community. I mean, if you ask any rocker or name me a jazz player, they'll name you Joe Pass.
Yeah.
Obviously, his work with Oscar Peterson, Ella Fitzgerald, that elevated him to kind of TV success.
Yeah.
Didn't it? And he's just a master of using the basics and demonstrating how far you can expand and what you can, and the beautiful music you can create, just using like shell voicings and stuff.
Yeah.
Just an absolute. I mean, the kind of tunes that he could play as well. I mean, I heard him play Joy Spring. Obviously there's that version of Giant Steps on Virtuoso, which is wonderful. I mean, he was a heavy guy. He could play over the heavy tunes. He wasn't just sitting there playing Autumn Leaves, But no matter what he touched, it would turn into gold.
And I think the players that wanted to play with him are a testament to. I think when you're definitely when you're a younger player, you might listen to someone like Joe Pass and think, I've heard this before. What's the fuss all about? But, if Oscar Peterson wants you to be the guitarist in his band, you're doing something right. That album with the Prez, Lester Young, and the Oscar Peterson trio with Joe Pass is a absolute masterclass in everything from early swing language to bebop and then beyond post-bop language from Oscar Peterson sometimes. One of my absolute favourite albums, I think it's called the Oscar Peterson Trio featuring Lester Young, I think, featuring the Prez. But it's absolutely fantastic, and it's one of the ones which really opened my eyes and ears to Joe Pass. Another thing that comes to mind with Joe Pass is that classic clip of, I think it's Donna Lee, where they're cooking at 300 BPM plus. And Joe just has a laugh about the fact that he drops out of his solo. So he was obviously a really humble guy. From that clip alone, you can tell that. And he's just having fun, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, however, there are other clips where he's absolutely cooking over the at the speed picking too.
Yeah.
So
Oh, he's got it. He can do it.
yeah, he can do
In
it.
a bad day, and he doesn't take it to heart, and it's really like endearing.
That's the
I love that
thing.
clip.
Yeah. Sometimes his picking's not as tight as others. Maybe he lost it a bit when he got older or something. But no, but there are recordings of him playing. I think he was playing some Jazz Master or something, and he was absolutely slaying it. So yeah, Joe Pass at whatever that number that is, number 7. Okay. So next, I know many people want him higher, but I've got John McLaughlin
Right.
at number 6.
Yeah.
So I love John McLaughlin's music, especially the early Mahavishnu
Yeah.
stuff. I love that trio album that he did with Trio Carto or something, that drummer, that percussion player, Trilao Cart. I can't remember how to pronounce his name. But, and some of his Indian fusion stuff, Shakti is it called?
Yeah.
Very interesting stuff. And obviously I love that Mahavishnu stuff. For me, it's more about his music than his guitar playing specifically.
Yeah.
I find when he plays guitar, he's more kind of creating a soundscape with his lines, as the clarity to each note isn't quite in the same kind of ballpark as a guy like Holdsworth. It's more like he's kind of going for an energy in his playing and a rawness. And I love it. And obviously, if it wasn't for John McLaughlin and the Mahavishnu, we wouldn't have had the 70s jazz rock explosion. So, obviously, he played with Miles Davis, played with huge amounts of artists. So yeah, what are your thoughts on John McLaughlin? Let's go down here to try and avoid the wind.
Well, we'll cut down that way. Okay. Yeah. So there was that Mahavishnu Orchestra album that I had as a teenager, and again, I'm embarrassed to admit I can't remember which one it was, but I remember that was the first time I heard that particular fusion with the Indian influence, which I think nowadays has possibly been overdone.
Yeah.
I heard an okay, oh well, no, not an okay. I heard a Jacob Collier track relatively recently where he was doing it, and that influence was undeniable in that. He did it very nicely. But yeah, that was my first exposure to that sound, and my first exposure, I would say, probably to a technical picker playing that clean in terms of tone, because he wasn't always blasting the lead tones, although he did. He could do it on an acoustic guitar. He could do it with full gain. So seeing that when you're used to players like Satriani and 𝐤𝐸 again, or Steve Vai, was quite mind blowing. So he was the first guy that I really saw doing that particular thing, in the way that he did it, and what a killer player!
Yeah, an absolute monster. So yeah, John McLaughlin at number 6. So yeah, absolute master. So at number 5, we're coming in with Pat Metheny. An undeniable master. I mean, one of the greats from the, well, I don't know, most recent generation or previous generation, whatever you want to call it. But I mean, just what a master! What a journey he's gone on. He's always pushing, Pat Metheny, and that's what I love about him. Like, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Bright Size Life and the White Album. So his early albums, I love those albums. But I mean, but then you go forward in time and you get an album like Question and Answers.
Yeah, Silver Story.
Well, yeah,
The
Secret Stuff. Yeah,
I mean, you lose him at that point, don't you?
yeah,
To
it's
me,
not
that's why I managed to pick him up.
I know you love that more fusiony side of Pat Metheny, and it is very cool. You know what I'm like. I just love to hear him blasting over some changes.
Well, there's a bit of that in Secret Story. One of my favourite solos of all time is at the end of The Truth Will Always Be, which is that synth guitar solo that he does. And he did a similar thing on the Letter From Home album as well, a really killer synth solo. I forget the track. Letter From it'll come to me, but absolute killer stuff on the guitar synth. But yeah, The Truth Will Always Be, that is, if you are someone who's maybe struggling to get into jazz players, that's a really great place to start because it's in a very pop aesthetic. But, I mean, it's a masterclass in how to build a solo from a killer scale run to start to get the momentum going at the start, and then just endless licks to keep the flow going. But yeah, obviously, what a master player.
Yeah, I mean, he's just an all-time great, isn't he?
And his solo works as well. That'll be the other thing. It's just his solo guitar arrangements are really, really beautiful. That Sound of Silence, again, to some people, might be a little bit cheesy, but it's so well done. That Nora Jones one that he did on the Jules Holland as well. It's amazing.
Oh, I love that acoustic album, that baritone album. That I do love that. That is unbelievable. I mean, and if you just think about the impact he's had
as a composer.
But yeah, as a composer, but also as a player.
Yeah.
So guys like, I mean, Kurt Rosenwinkel, Mike Marino, Gillard Hexelman, all of the modern jazz cats are influenced through Pat Metheny. He was a key figure in the development of the guitar.
100%.
So yeah.
And the other thing as well I would say with Pat is he's really crafted what that jazz tone is. Taking guys like Jim Hall, who we didn't really mention his tone really, but he really helped continue to shape and modernize what that jazz guitar box thing can be. And not only with the synth stuff, but literally just like adding a bit of reverb and delay and starting to be more open to modern innovations. And now you can be very, very open with your interpretation of a jazz guitar tone in the modern day. And I think Pat is a big influence on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do categorize Pat as a jazz fusion player, really. But obviously, he's got the tradition in abundance too. So next on the list, we're going for Django Reinhardt. I mean, Django, he's so high up this list because, I mean, he was so ahead of his time. I mean, if you listen to his chops, then, you know, a modern day guitarist would be jealous of chops like that. It's not as if, you know, they've aged at all.
No. And he was doing it with his physical limitation, of course.
Exactly. It's just ridiculous. His language, it was ridiculous. I mean, just the impact that he's had, it's just epic.
Yeah, and that was all a development of that gypsy jazz language. But you would, I'm not an expert at gypsy jazz, but I would imagine some of the stuff he was doing would have flowed originally better on the violin, and he's commandeered those lines onto the guitar, which I think was probably originally more of a rhythm roll, and he's taken those ideas into the realm of lead guitar in that genre.
Very much so. When I listen to Django, I hear the influence from these kind of show/classical arrangements in his phrasing. If you listen to like the old movies and you listen to the phrasing of the singers, and then you listen to the likes of Stefan Grappelli and Django's vibrato, the way they finish phrases, there's a huge influence from classical music as well, and show music. But he's just again an undeniable master and a huge figurehead of jazz. I remember seeing an interview with Martin Taylor on Andy Edwards' channel, who I'm a big fan of, Andy Edwards.
Yeah.
And Martin Taylor was saying that there were many players with a similar style at the time, and this obviously Martin will know, and that's obviously true. However, obviously Django's become the figurehead of that style. I think many people think that people pull these styles out of thin air, shall we say.
Yes.
But no, obviously there's a lineage to this stuff. But he really did. He was the figurehead of the style, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think the thing that strikes me most about the gypsy jazz style, and still even the modern players do, is the clarity with which they outline the changes. Really heavily arpeggio based. Obviously there's linear stuff going on there as well, but that you can always, with or without the accompaniment, you can tell exactly the changes they're playing over. And that clarity, I mean, I first heard it from Borelli, obviously. That was my first exposure to that sound. Again, what a killer player. But the clarity at which they're outlining the harmony it's the first thing that strikes me in that style.
100%. He's just a legend and a master.
Yeah.
So that brings us on to number 3, I think. And at number 3, so now we're getting into controversial territory again.
Okay.
And number 3, I've put Wes Montgomery.
Okay.
I know many people, obviously he deserves the number 1 spot, don't get me wrong, but there's only one number 1 in my eyes. But yeah, so Wes Montgomery, I mean, I love Wes's playing. I think he's the first guitarist to kind of take, well, not including Django, but first electric guitarist to really take expression on the instrument to another level. There were many guys around at that time, unbelievable players like Hank Garland, Johnny Smith. Don't get me wrong, they're wonderful players. Hank Garland would technically smoke Wes. But just Wes's melodic control and style and phrasing was just something to behold. It was unbelievable. I mean, there are so many amazing albums by Wes. I think it was Smoking at the Half Note. That's a very, very famous one. I'll be honest, the one that really took me was Boss Guitar. And his solo on Days and Wine and Roses.
Yeah.
It's just the most melodically perfect bit of guitar playing I can think of. It's just absolutely beautiful. The way he seamlessly flows through those changes.
Yeah, and obviously the first thing that comes to mind with Wes is the thub style, isn't it? That innovation. I'm not sure if that story's true or not. I'm sure everyone's already heard it, but apparently it was that he was practicing late at night and he didn't want to wake his kids up, which is something I can relate to nowadays. But he, regardless of how that innovation came about, that's something that even guys like Guthrie, you'll see him occasionally playing with his thumb. They've taken those that technique into the modern day, and that octave thing, and it's just so iconic. But I mean, yeah, you mentioned Hank Garland, but he did still have the chops, Wes. That he could blow.
Oh,
he
could.
He could smoke everyone.
But I mean, Hank Garland, absolutely like a shredder.
Yeah, but there was no shortage of chops for Wes.
Oh no, certainly not.
He wasn't held back by. There was no technical limitations for him.
No, certainly not. No. Yeah, Wes is just an absolute beautiful player. Obviously, people would call him the Charlie Parker of guitar, wouldn't they? Because obviously, I suppose Charlie Christian wasn't around long enough to really develop the style, embrace that. And then obviously, if you think about guys that Wes influenced, I mean, George Benson's the big dog, isn't he? So I mean, without Wes, there would be no George Benson. So
not a world you want to live in.
Yeah, I mean, he influenced everyone, didn't he?
Yeah. Well, he was the guy. He was the jazz guitarist, wasn't he?
Exactly. I mean, he is the jazz guitar goat, really. But I'm going with opinion after number 3, I'm afraid, guys. So sorry. I'll apologize for that. But yeah, Where's at number 3? At number 2, I'm putting John Scofield.
𝐤𝐲.
Scofield. I know some people will be like, how can you put Scofield above Pat Metheny? Scofield is just an absolute master. What blows me away about Sco, I was chatting to my mate Tommy Ramon the other day on the phone. And the thing that blows me away about Scofield, he can play in any style. It could be the most rootsy blues or gospel or the most modern jazz, playing with the likes of 𝐤𝐸℧𝐸𝐺𝐬 and stuff. And he's always keeping them on their toes.
Yeah.
Like he's at the forefront of any style he chooses to play, and he can adapt his playing, and it always sounds perfect. Me and you were chatting the other day about that album, something to do with time. I can't remember the name of the album. I'll write it on the screen, but the Joe Henderson album where he performed Circles on that album. I mean, it's just some of the most unbelievable modern jazz guitar playing I've ever heard. Comping wise, soloing wise, his sense of time feel is truly unique.
Yeah. That tone, that picking on the bridge, perhaps someone did that before him. I'm not aware of it. He popularized that, and it never sounds bad. It just never sounds bad as soon as he pulls that picking hand back to the bridge. Oh, it's just magic starts happening, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is just magic with John Scofield. I mean, his harmonic vocabulary.
Yeah.
We haven't really talked about that yet on this list. But with John Scofield, like he's got some absolute filthy language.
Yeah.
Some of that diminished stuff, but also his jazz lines and just his melody, his feel. Everything with John Scofield, to me, is elite. Beyond elite. I mean, I will mention I saw him playing that gig that he played with Kurt. And when it came down to a blues, I mean, Kurt's obviously the young whippersnapper. And the new thing, I'll be honest, I think Sco had him. I mean, how can you go up against Sco on a blues? I mean, it's like a lamb to slaughter, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's just such, even when he's not playing the blues, it's just such an integral part of his language. One of my favourite bits of Sco is that intro he does to Georgia on My Mind with Chris Potter, where he's got this really broken style where he'll give you just the root and then a cluster, and then he'll suddenly go off on a line. It's really expansive and open, but at the same time so dialed in and rootsy. And he doesn't need to give it, although he doesn't need to give it full beans. He's just giving you exactly what you need. And in that particular context, he's just giving that particular track exactly the start it needs. And then when Chris comes in, obviously, it's game over at that point. But yeah, what a player. I suppose there's a kind of honourable mention if you've already mentioned Pat and you've mentioned Sco, which is, of course, I don't think is going to be in your number one spot, is Bill Frisell. And
we talked about him with Jim Hall before. He is definitely an honourable mention, as is Pat Martino, who I was considering.
But those three, they were the big Boston players.
Yeah.
And I think most modern players can be traced back to one of them nowadays, can't they?
100%. Yeah. I mean, I'm just a huge Scofield fan.
Yeah.
Obviously, the final gig that I'll mention with, because he's played on so much stuff. Oh, the early recordings with Elvin Jones, they're absolutely smoking. And obviously the Steve Swallow and Bill, who's that drummer?
It's Bill Stewart.
Bill Stewart, that's the one. Yeah, Bill Stewart, that trio gig. I did a gig in London for a year, and we played that set on so many occasions. I learned that whole set.
Yeah.
And it taught me so much playing through those tunes. They don't sound hard, but trust me, if you try and play that stuff,
God, yeah,
it's extremely challenging. So yeah,
Well, Scold. I think he's just always relevant, isn't he? He's always. I saw even, I think it was as recent as last week. He's playing with Snarky Puppy. They want to play with him. He's just the guy, isn't he? He's just, who doesn't want to play with 𝐤𝐲? Probably in his 70s now, I would imagine.
probably.
Not,
Yeah, it might
haven't he?
be. I
And
mean,
he's still at the top of his game. I mean, he's not lost anything with age, as far as I can tell.
No, I think him and Matheny were a little bit younger than 𝐤𝐬𝐧𝐥.
Yeah.
But he must be in his 70s now.
Yes. But still rocking.
Oh, unbelievable player. Well, that brings us on to the number one. And I am calling him, well, actually, I'm calling him the number one jazz guitar GOAT. And it's obviously Dave Gilmour.
Dave Gilmour.
Yeah, for his phrasing and
Are we
feel, man.
Are we?
Nah, I'm only joking. Obviously, I know.
Dave.
I know we're going for a vegan lunch with you, but we're not that vegan. But no, it's obviously Alan Holdsworth.
What a shocker.
Has to be Alan Holdsworth. And Alan Holdsworth gets snubbed by so many in the jazz community. And this lack of appreciation of the master, grinds my goat, as they say. Alan Holdsworth is the most advanced single note line soloist ever. The way he can flow, well, at least on guitar, the way he can flow through changes is like no one else. I mean, obviously, I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of that whole 80s aesthetic, the 80s sound that Holdsworth had on his albums. I do far prefer a more organic and, well, that's a silly word, organic.
Analog.
Yeah, a little bit more of a live kind of sound. But the thing is, Alan Holdsworth is so amazing that I can't help but love it. His album None Too Soon, where he's playing the jazz standards, as I say, it sounds a little bit processed, but the solos are just on another level.
That Inner Urge track.
Well, the Inner Countdown.
God.
I mean, it's from another planet. The degree that Holdsworth, took his single note line playing, and obviously harmonically on the instrument too, as far as chords. He was extremely advanced with that, and just the impact he had. And I understand for many that many will be putting, Wes Montgomery on top, or any of the other guys for that matter. And they'll be like, oh, well, yeah, but Holdsworth's not jazz. But for me, Holdsworth is the true spirit of jazz. He's like the searching musician. And yes, there's other influences in his playing, just like there are other influences in all the guys we listed playing. Whether it be blues or any kind of roots music form. And Holdsworth, obviously, there was this rock aesthetic. But that doesn't take away from the jazz spirit in his playing.
Completely agree. He's just blowing at all times, isn't he? He's just constantly blowing. The thing with Holdsworth is we hear these stories about how he was really, I suppose nitpicking is the word. He was really, really, everything had to be perfect. And yet there's such a casual, relaxed aesthetic to his playing. It seems so flowing and so relaxed. And yet, apparently, he was this kind of quite torn musician. And there's the classic story about, was it Velvet? Which one was it?
Velvet Darkness.
Yeah. He didn't want it to be released. Yeah, it was Velvet Darkness. I mean, the playing on that is unbelievable. Why on who would not want that album to be released? Obviously, it shouldn't have been released based on what happened with that. But I mean, what a blessing that it was in hindsight.
100%.
But that's testament to the man's sense of perfection, seeking for something. I mean, he was obviously dealing with something higher than the rest of us, wasn't he? There was something extraterrestrial going on there.
He was on some special sauce, wasn't he? Definitely.
Well, yeah, it was the Timothy Taylors, apparently.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's true, but
shall we have the conversation about is Holdsworth an outside player?
Well, that's another
for another time.
I mean, yeah,
That's a can of worms.
Yeah, that is a kind of words. All I'll say is Holdsworth is the most, well, one of the most melodically advanced players. And if you can't hear the melodies in his playing, that's on you. That's
Listen
not
more
on, yeah,
and more.
that's not on Alan Holdsworth. If you're one of these people that's just saying, oh, he's just playing random, like, streams of shred notes and all. No, within one bar of an Alan Holdsworth idea, there's more melodic content than in, a whole solo of 99% of guitar players.
Completely agreed. Although I would say, in my own journey, you got to Holdsworth before I did, and I struggled to get into it with my frame of reference that I was coming from, which was more of a kind of, I suppose at that time it was more Steve Vai, and I suppose I was into a Guthrie phase at that point, but that was kind of as advanced as my language was at that point. So it can be hard getting into Holdsworth if you're coming from that aesthetic, or at least it was for me. The great bridging player for me was Tim Miller. And Tim Miller, actually, once you listen to enough Holdsworth and you listen to enough Tim Miller, they've actually got very little in common, really.
100%.
But they were similar enough coming from that angle to me, where I liked the Tim Miller trio stuff, and I thought, all right, well, let's check out this Holdsworth stuff. And he was a great bridging player for me. And then once I was in, that was it. And obviously, I'm now the 𝐻𝐻7 player guy. So I'm very into that Holdsworth language, although I don't know necessarily that you would hear much of that influence in my playing.
Oh, not really. Not in.
It's an inspiration rather than a language that I've taken from Holdsworth.
Yeah, maybe a little bit more in my playing as well, but
definitely in yours, yeah.
but still, I do try to not sound like Holdsworth, because I believe that.
Which is quite easy.
Well, yeah. But I know many people just hear legato guitar and straight away they're like, oh, it sounds like Holdsworth.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Alan Holdsworth is just an absolute icon of the electric guitar. So,
well, I'm shocked he made you top 10. Absolutely shocked.
well,
I've never predicted.
I think everyone knew that it was going to be good old Alan at the number one spot, but can't be anyone else really. But anyway, so that is my top. Well, mine and Charles's. Well, no, my list.
Yours.
Yeah, my list of top jazz/fusion players, because I see it all as one for me, a jazz and fusion.
Yeah, some good takes there. Some good takes. I would agree with most of that, I think. The order, I don't know. I would maybe change. There'd be some players.
Fair enough.
Like I say, I'm quite ignorant of the traditional, the OGs, really. So there might have been a few different players in there for me, but certainly quite a lot of crossover there for me as well.
Yeah, well, regardless, they were all greats. I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah.
So thanks very much for watching, guys. Obviously, all Charles's details will be below in the description, so definitely check out his freebies over on Instagram. As I say, he really is popping off over there. He's got some big name subscribers who I won't followers or whatever you call them, which obviously I won't disclose on here. But yeah, he's really taking off over there, so that's really good to see. And he will be back on the old tube again, but obviously he's got a lot of commitments at the moment. So, but he will be coming back at some point. He'll be, leaving his cave. So, yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna go. Well, I'm not gonna have a vegan lunch, but Charles will have a vegan lunch, and I'm gonna go and have a steak. And yeah, obviously, if you want lessons, you know who to call. And I'll be back very shortly for another video. Take it easy, guys.
Cheers, guys. Bye.